book, Cashing Out, is about how to win the wealth game by walking away.
There are several reasons why we wanted to write the book, but one of the bigger reasons was we stumbled upon a set of data, and it basically predicted that median Black wealth would be zero by 2053. And that was really alarming to us because it validated some of the things that we knew to be true. People that we worked with, people that were in our families, that despite outward appearances, despite graduating from college or even driving a nice car and having a nice home, that most people that we knew were unfortunately still struggling to get ahead. And in some cases, were going backwards. Now, at the same time, we had actually had one foot in and kept our eye on this movement called the Financial Independence Retire Early movement. And those people who were a part of that and kind of embracing those principles were getting drastically different results than a lot of the other people that we knew. They were really zeroing in on their spending. They were taking it upon themselves to be more active investors and investing at far greater rates than most standard rules of thumb, which typically dictate around 10 to 15%. And as a result, the impact to their net worth was booming. And so we figured, as we were seeing these two things happening at the same time, that we really wanted to use our time and our talents to see if we could take some of the principles that we were seeing over here and apply them to this community that really needed that information.
Cashing out is really about redefining what it means to win in a career context. I think for a long time, a lot of us have dictated winning as getting the big job or getting a hyper visible role or a huge responsibility. But winning in this day and age is really just being able to walk away on your own terms. That is the new ambition. And I think regarding a social stigma, it really depends on which demographic you ask. In some demographics, say if you are a white male who has aspirations to be in tech, this is actually celebrated and encouraged. You're conditioned to know to cash out from the time that you're school aged, and it informs all of your decisions. And in those communities, there are examples of people who have done this successfully. But in marginalized communities and communities of color, we don't have nearly as many role models who have successfully completed this task. What we have instead are a bunch of people who tried, but came up against structural barriers, structural challenges, and then failed, right? And so what we get instead are cautionary tales. We get risk-averse behaviors simply because we haven't seen it as successfully done in our communities.
There are really two big reasons why you need to give your income a purpose. I think the first one is that, and this is applicable to every working American, is that you will get tired. There will come a time for any set of reasons, whether you're just getting older or you have children or multiple children, or you've just been working multiple jobs, but there will come a point where you will get tired. And so you really need to look at those high earning periods of your life where you have the ability to make smarter long-term decisions about your money and your income, and start investing or saving and investing so that you can create income for the future tired or even lazier version of you. But the second reason is because it's actually becoming more and more difficult for people to save, not just because at this moment we're living through a really high inflation period, but because marketers and brands have become really, really good and sophisticated at enticing us to want things that we actually don't need. And so on average, most people are exposed to around 6,000 to 10,000 advertisements a day. And so you're always going to be bombarded by enticing messages that seem as if they are designed just for you and at the right moment, that are always going to derail you from some other way of spending your money. And so it's really important to have that clear purpose for your income as a defense mechanism to all of the other interruptions that you're experiencing on a daily basis. Lifestyle inflation is the tendency for the people's the amount of money that they spend or their cost of living to increase as their income increases. So the more money we have, there tends to be a tendency that we tend to use that money to buy nicer things or to buy more conveniences instead of using that to save and invest for the long term. It is something that impacts everyone. Media plays a huge role in this. Every single day, we're shown that there's a new, a bigger, a better, a sexier, or faster version of some of the products or experiences that we want. And it makes you feel like what you have just isn't enough or isn't meeting this new need. And as a result, people get stuck in this cycle of consumerism and constantly trying to find happiness through buying something to solve a problem, only to realize that the goalpost changes next year when the new version of that thing suddenly becomes available and it's more expensive. You really need to be fighting against the media and marketing machine that is enticing people to make decisions that actually work against their long-term interests.
It's a difficult question to answer because I don't want to suggest that the American dream is impossible. There are lots of examples that we hear from on a regular basis who attribute the American dream to their success. But I do think that the American dream as we know it is incomplete. If you were to ask anyone what the American dream is, they're going to give you a checklist of items. They're going to say you work hard, you go to school, you get a good job, you get a home, and that's the end of the story. And unfortunately, that's too short. That's not exactly how it works. It's not that you just have to work hard. It's that you have to work hard, earn a living wage, invest that money, and then eventually you get the gift of retirement or some sort of other financial benefit. But for now, we just continue to keep repeating the short story, and it hasn't evolved to include a more nuanced narrative.
We felt it was important to include some point of view on Black buying power because a lot of what we're talking about the book isn't just money or your career. It's all of those things through the lens of race. And whenever there is a hot button item in the media or something that's impacting society with respect to Black people, more often than not, someone's going to throw out the idea of Black buying power. It's almost like Thor's hammer. This is the thing that we can use, this magical power, to help shatter all of these oppressive institutions. And very similar to the American dream, it's an incomplete statement. It's valid in some cases, more specifically when it comes to marketing share. But from an everyday standpoint, just focusing or talking about Black buying power isn't really going to do much to drive to drive progress for a couple of reasons. One, you can't just talk about Black buying power by itself, right? You need to talk about it relative to other groups. And when you look at that, you actually see that while $1.4 trillion is a lot, which is the number of Black buying power, it's relatively small compared to white buying power. But secondly, we've got two opposing metrics here. We've got the might of Black buying power, while at the same time understanding that the net worth, which I think is a more relevant financial metric, is actually declining and slated to be zero by 2053, which, by the way, did not include any of the impact that the pandemic may have had on the typical Black family or Black businesses. And so it's safe to assume that while you've got this big number over here, $1.4 trillion, while it sounds meaningful, the more important metric is net worth, and that number is actually going down.
If our experience is any indicator, corporate America actually benefits the more financially independent employees that they have. And the reason for that is because we've all read the dismal stats around employee engagement. We've all been participants of the forced fun after work activities and the attempts to make us all unite under these, lofty corporate visions and ambitions. But when you have people who are employed for reasons other than needing the money, what you actually have is the environment where people feel more comfortable having candid conversations. They feel more comfortable being honest about the challenges that we're up against. You get financial projections that are actually reflective of the environment that we're in, and everyone's just a little bit more honest. And so we think that any employer who is encouraging employees to become financially independent actually benefits because you then have the ingredients to build the culture that you say you want.
It's another one of those really difficult questions to answer. One of our good friends has told us repeatedly that we're all compromised under capitalism, right? And so to some extent, it's very difficult to sort of separate some of the desired outcomes from the undesirable outcomes. I think what's important, though, is to just focus on the positive, focus on what you actually can do. And so unfortunately, if you are investing in certain companies and you are getting ideal returns, you benefit from those incomes. But in some cases, we all know that not every company does good or does a good job of upholding some of the values that they should be, and they end up having negative outcomes in society. On the positive side, there's a lot that you can do with those returns, right? There are a lot of problems that you can solve in your own family, your community. There are businesses that you can start that can then be focused on solving some of the issues that are specifically more important to you. And so I think it's important for people to not obviously acknowledge that those things happen, that there is a bit of a downside, if you will, to investing. But there are other options that you can undertake that allow you to minimize some of those negative impact. And at the end of the day, when with those returns, you have the power to create some good in the world. And it's ultimately up to you, and it puts you in a position of control.
This was a topic that was near and dear to me. I'm very relationship oriented, and my friends and family are a key part of my lifestyle. And so we actually called the second half of the book The Daily Struggle, because we wanted people to understand what it's like when you actually start to implement these ideas, once you actually start to do things that are countercultural. And so the advice that I have for people is, one, to not take it personally. You have discovered something that a lot of people aren't ready for at some point in their lives, or in a season of life. They might be more open to the message, but if they are not for it, you don't have to take it personal. And the second thing to know is that there is a community of people who are like-minded and who do agree with you. And so your mission and your goal becomes to find that community. It can be heartbreaking to admit that your friends and family won't be your community in this endeavor. Everyone wants to believe that we get this kind of undying support and cheerleading from our friends and family, but that's just not the case. And so we teach in the book to use the tools of the internet, of hashtags, of organizing principles to find your like-minded community. And that's who you're going to look to for advice, for encouragement when times get tough. When we started writing this book in pre-2020, so back when the world was very different, a lot of the ideas that we were suggesting were radical. Race certainly was not talked about at work the way that it is today, and money certainly was not talked about at work the way that it is today. Both of those topics were very taboo. And then after 2020, after the racial uprisings of the summer, after the Great Resignation, after a lot of people experiencing sudden layoffs and furloughs, I think there was a new opening in the universe for these types of conversations. And so one of the biggest surprises in the writing process has been how open workplaces are to having these conversations within their walls, how business leaders now see this as their duty to create a culture and an environment where their employees can have candid conversations, where they can bring in facilitators like us and like many of the other people to kind of talk through these situations and practice conflict resolution in real time. And we're just so excited to be able to contribute to the body of work, along with a lot of other brilliant researchers and leaders in the space, to help facilitate these conversations and make actual progress and not just progress on paper.